Let's talk about eras, Rick, because this was your original post, and we, I think, are in agreement that we are in a new era. But maybe it's a little bit harder to divide up the previous 20 years of WWE. I think we would all agree that, growing up, it was very easy to define eras. You had the Hulk Hogan era, 84 to 92. 92, you can argue, is a bit of a transition year. It's certainly a different company by mid-93 when Hogan's gone, for good. Well, he does come back in 2002. And, people associate that with, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, New Generation. 97 is probably another transition year because I don't think it fits in neatly with the previous couple of years, but it also is very different from 98 because you have the presence of Bret and Shawn all over the television on 97. And then 98 through 2001, kind of WrestleMania 17 is probably the easiest to define era of the bunch, the Attitude Era. 2001, a transition year, I think, with the Invasion because that doesn't fit in neatly. But you get to the last 20 years, I think I see here in your notes, 2002 to 2007 is typically defined as the Ruthless Aggression era. They've made documentaries on Peacock or WWE Network, as you know it. Is that something we are kind of all in agreement? You would be 2002 to 2007 is its own era?
Yeah, although I like to call it the Triple H cosplay years. Particularly the first bit when he was cosplaying Ric Flair.
Yeah, or Harley Race too. Yeah, I mean, he was.
Oh yeah, with those lamb chops. Oh my word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Triple H's fat baby years. Yeah, I think that's right because I think is it 08 where the PG comes in.
Yes.
From 2002 up to about 2007, we had that era where. I think Triple H was a big influence, all joking aside, but he wanted it to be like Mid-South from 20 years before that, and he wanted him to tell stories, and he wanted him to keep the world title on him for 4 years, and there was a lot of blood and a lot of bloody matches and bloody feud enders and. So yeah, I think that really fits, and obviously they call it Ruthless Aggression now, which ties into the John Cena promo, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's also you have like 2002 is also when they instituted the brand split, so which is very different than how the TV was before. They start having brand only pay-per-views in 2003. The end of that era, you talk about 2008 is when they officially went to PG. The year kind of, I don't know if that's the official end. For a lot of people, I think the Benoit situation sort of ended.
Yeah.
Although it was does WrestleMania 24 really seem that much different than WrestleMania 23? I feel that, for me personally, because I kind of stopped watching for a while after Benoit. We had another discussion about that, separate discussion on the Facebook page. People could check out. It really was PG because there was that Michaels Jericho match where Vince decided, okay, no more blood on TV. And, the move to PG really was a market shift. Now, it's really after 2008 where it becomes very difficult to define the eras. Because 2010, there's like a massive change at the top. 2010 is the last full-time year of Triple H, Undertaker, Edge, Jericho, Batista, and Michaels. Like, there's this massive exodus of the support structure around John Cena, and they were kind of caught with, trying to push these guys, like you mentioned earlier, out of mothballs, Kingston or Sheamus. So it kind of feels like 2008, 2009 almost exists by itself. And then,
yeah, I mean, I could buy that, and to be fair, they tried an awful lot of guys in those years. There was an awful lot of new guys. They had different ways of trying to get them onto TV. So it was obviously well after the sort of OVW years, and the ECW TV show morphed into the original NXT at that point. I don't know. I think it kind of like was the precursor, wasn't it? I think it was still ECW, but it was pretty much a WWE C show. And there were just so many guys who just seemed to come and go, and guys like, I mean, I mentioned him the other day on the page, Ezekiel Jackson, and the guy who was the Pope in TNA. I can't remember what his WWE name was. He used to wear the tracksuit.
Are you talking about Elijah Burke?
Elijah Burke, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, Elijah Burke, and we had just so many guys, and let's say some of them are still there now. Kofi being the obvious example, but like you say, there was this massive shift coming in 2010, and they knew that was coming, I think, and they were trying to get all these fresh guys from somewhere, and just lots and lots of them didn't really go anywhere.
And what's interesting is, you have Triple H ascending to power in an executive role in 2011. And it's very interesting because, 2008, 2009, maybe they exist in their own. But who were the two guys above all else that got over the most as we began that new decade? It was CM Punk and it was Daniel Bryan. And what was so fascinating about that is they were the two guys that Vince McMahon probably cared about the least of all the new signings. Like he didn't want it, and it seemed that the last decade, 2010 through 2019, I always thought was defined by an identity crisis within WWE, in the sense that they had to begrudgingly accept that a portion of the modern pro wrestling fan base wanted to see guys like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, even if at the top, even if Vince McMahon did not.
Yeah, and what they did was they pretty much made the company their heel.
Yes.
And they would do that all the time. And it worked with Punk and Bryan to an extent. But funny thing is, when they really lent into that with the Authority, it was absolutely terrible. When it was a bit more subtle, certainly the CM Punk stuff, but when it was CM Punk going out there and trashing the company with a lot of it was fairly true, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
From his promos, his pipe bomb promo and that sort of thing. But the company would be the heel, and it would allow them to, begrudgingly or not, to get these guys over just by railing against the company. And a little bit, we mentioned earlier, didn't we, when the Miz would trash John Cena over the US title, and call out John Cena when it was injured. That kind of worked for the Miz. So anybody who rallied against the company or against John Cena would somehow get over as a babyface, which was a bit strange. But that really worked. And to me, I think there's maybe a shift, because I don't think it was too bad until the Authority thing really kicked in. And
yes,
and I'm going to pick on a guy I don't like. And I've never liked, and when I listen to you guys' old shows, it sickens me when Ryan Drosty likes him. But honestly, the minute Seth Rollins turned on the Shield, I think they're done. And to me, that whole, from as soon as Seth Rollins as a top guy with his whiny, squeaky voice, no. And I think it's done. And I actually don't think the few years before that are too bad. Certainly the Punk years, and then the Daniel Bryan years. But to me, around when did Rollins turn?
2014, the summer.
Yeah.
So
I think that 5 years from there is the worst in their history.
Yes, I agree, and I'm glad you chose that as the line of demarcation, because I think 2010 to 2014, you've got this identity crisis. You've got Punk. You've got Bryan. And what happens in the course of 2014? Several significant things happen, Rick. One, Punk leaves at the start of the year. Two, you have the birth of the WWE Network, which all of a sudden means these monthly pay-per-views really aren't as important as just getting people to subscribe and give them $9.99 a month. Or whatever. Like, that's the end game. It's not, let's create compelling storylines and do a big number of pay-per-view. It's, let's just give these people enough that they're going to give us $9.99 a month. And so, and then you talked about Rollins' turn. I also think the big thing with 2014, what makes it a transition year somewhat, is that by the end of the year, that was when it was very clear they wanted to put Roman Reigns in John Cena's position. And also Brock Lesnar became that 2014 was the year he started to be booked the same way he is now. Like, they struggled the first couple years with it, losing twice to Triple H, pardon me, actually only lost once to him, but he lost the big one at WrestleMania. Lost
to John Cena.
Yeah, he lost to John Cena. But back to your earlier point, 2010 to 2014, it felt that they did try big summer angles. You had the Nexus, Summer of Punk, Lesnar's return. 2013, that was the rise of the Yes Movement and Daniel Bryan. Every summer felt kind of fresh, and then that 2014 to 2019, I'm with you. You have not only the network, but Lesnar, being booked kind of the same as this dominant guy, the rise of, them unsuccessfully trying to put Reigns as a top babyface. You have this bubbling power struggle, and which really started to become a thing in 2016 with NXT.
Yeah, and an interesting one. You've got NXT, and they're producing a show that is more popular than the two flagship shows that they put out every week. So they created their own competition, effectively. But everybody would seem to be a fan of NXT. And the number of people that you'd see in that era say, I only watch NXT. I'm not giving my money to Vince. I just watch NXT.
Yeah, and like I said, that became NXT as an alternative. Well, NXT certainly never drew. I mean, because it was, for the longest time, it was only on, the network. It didn't go on USA till 2019. So, but it was exposed as an alternative eventually to main roster once AEW came about. But yeah, in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, it was very much like, okay, we understand that many of you hate our main roster programming, so we'll just give you NXT and desperately hope you keep giving us $9.99 a month. Yeah,
which kind of works, but
yeah,
but it didn't say much for the actual show. I mean, I think honestly, I tried to think back about those 5 years. I mean, I've always liked Roman Reigns. I think I've said this before on the Facebook group, but this notion that he suddenly became good when he turned heel, whenever it was 2 years ago, is ridiculous. He was always good. And I think in 2016, he did some really good stuff with AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan. He was very good, but the character was terrible, and the refusal to do anything to fix it was the worst. The Goldberg comeback, the initial one, and those first couple of matches with Brock Lesnar, that was insanely good stuff. That first Goldberg promo, could never tire of watching that. And the sort of accidental rise of Becky Lynch, I think that was fantastic. But honestly, I couldn't think of anything else from 5 years that I would ever go back and look at.
Yeah, I mean, most of it just feels like a waste of time, right? Like, everything that happened in those years, what really had an effect? I mean, you talk about Reigns, they should have just turned him sooner, because it's, he seems cooler now, I think, is the key, and more of a star than when they were trying to force him as a babyface and he would just be a loser the whole time. He would literally lose the big matches. And now that he wins all the time, people, as a heel, people like him a little bit more. But I feel.
But the crazy thing there is, when he beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania and he came out the next night, has he ever felt cooler than that night? When he stood in the middle of the ring and just let him boo him?
No, he did, and that was the time to turn him, probably.
Of course it was. If he came out the next week and did the "this is my yard now" thing again, that would have been That would have been over like hell as a heel.
Yeah, but I just feel like that entire period, it's just, I don't know what you want to call it. It just feels like a colossal waste of time. But
I think it does, and I think going back to where it started, that Hell in a Cell 2019 show that you guys talked about, which is it's a really good listen if you want to trash it. Again, you go back and listen to that show. There's nobody there. So all of those people that they spent those few years on, they're not there anymore. The Fiend, Braun Strowman, the Wyatt family, or the rest of the Wyatt family, obviously. Brody Lee died, but Luke Harper had been released before then. None of those guys who were coming through in that era seem to be there anymore. And when I say go full circle, all the stars now that we're seeing on TV, they were all there before then. Even Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, really, the only person who became ascendant during that time period was Becky Lynch, like you mentioned. I mean, I guess that's the other thing too is, and you had them taking women's wrestling seriously. I guess that's probably going to be the lone cherry on top of that era in most people's eyes, is that they did start taking women's wrestling. So, but even then, we've reached a point now where, who were the women on top in 2016? Like, you looked at the WrestleMania 23 way was Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha. Okay, well, Sasha is maybe on her way out the door now, but that was 6 years ago. Over 6 years ago, until, a few weeks ago, she was still with the company. Really, it was just Bianca Belair is the only one that they pushed in traditional means. Yes, Ronda Rousey came into the fold, but that was someone who was just going to be at the top because she had to be at the top, not because they built her that way.
And again, I mean, to me, what was Ronda out? 3 years? Which, considering she, apart from Bianca Belair, she's like the only other new women's star, and she was away for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and she's a new star.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
But we talk about 2014 to 2019 WWE perhaps being a waste of time. This show was not a waste of time, in my opinion, Rick Skelton. I very much enjoyed it. We give you about 90 minutes of conversation here to the patrons. I thank you for joining us.